Welcome to episode 24 of the Silver Savage podcast. On this episode, you have Steve and myself, an episode earlier than usual, but taking the opportunity of just celebrated Father's Day to discuss some of our lessons, failures, and advices, along some other tangents discussing a variety of other issues concerning fatherhood, kids, and a lot more. We hope you enjoy it. Steven.
I love the way you say my name.
I love saying it, and I love saying it slow and deep.
Steven. See, I can't do that with PK. It's so aggressive and sharp.
That's the way it's supposed to be. Anyways, cheers. Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day. Yet another one. And thank you to the mothers who went through the hard, laborious task of making us fathers.
I don't know. I think my task was pretty laborious.
I mean, really? I mean,
you got to put up with months of hormones and then the follow-up hormones after.
I'm talking more the physical aspect, not the emotional. And
well, really, which one is harder though?
I guess that is subjective.
I tend to agree.
Because we can get into Latin women, Irish women, and blah, 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 blah.
True.
So, and I am, for the sake of my longevity and health, I am not breaching that topic.
Smart man. I'm on my fourth wedding, my fourth marriage. I'm still learning.
I grew up with nothing but women, so I learned a thing or two.
So, I guess we're recording this a day before Father's Day.
Pre-Father's Day.
Are you doing anything tomorrow?
Yes, I think. We are going to the Guinness Brewery. As I mentioned before, they're having a steak and beer thing for fathers. I'm not big on crowds. I've told you that before. I don't want to go. I'm kind of being made to go. I'd rather sit in my yard, grill some burgers, and drink some whiskey. But we'll see how it goes. I'm open. I'm open-minded.
My goal is to have my kids tomorrow and put them to work. Have them mow the lawn. Finish the insulation on the new studio.
That's right. And Lord willing, sooner rather than later, I'll have a lot more time to help you finish that.
There you go. So there's a lot of chores around the house, and what else can you do on Father's Day other than have your kids cater to you?
Yeah, you know what? I kind of reversed that today. I did all the lawn work, but helped my neighbor out. She doesn't even know I did, but her husband died. They have kids, and they're kind of grown. She's a widow, older, and the whole side of her house was covered in ivy. And I mean, it was going through her back door and the windows. Like, it was bad. Wow. I was ripping siding out, and I just went to town on it today and ripped. She don't even know I did it. I ripped, and the way I did it was probably not very smart. Well, once I cleared the ground level stuff, I cut the main artery, I guess you could say, the main root, and I leapt up and grabbed it and allowed my body weight to rip it off the side of the house.
Because that's what you need to do with your broken body.
Yeah. So, I mean, I paid the price in more ways than one. A lot of ibuprofen and whiskey. But the moral of the story is, I helped my neighbor, and it was nice. And she has no idea that I did that.
Those are typically the best ones, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I didn't do it because I wanted any gratification. There's absolutely nothing that woman can give me other than being a good neighbor. So I did it because I think we need to do more of that as a society.
I agree. So let's talk about Father's Day for a minute. You grew up without a father. How was that for you? How do you take Father's Day?
So, it's weird. I mean, because we can go into a whole diatribe of things here. Obviously, for me, that was my normal.
Hold on, Steve. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. Do you hear a static? Because I'm hearing a static on my side, and I just want to make sure that
I do not.
Okay, all right. Carry on. Might just be my headphones.
Carry on. So, for me, it was my normal, although it wasn't normal. It didn't really affect me until later in life. But, I noticed things, and it wasn't easy. My mother was a very traditional woman who When I say she was ignorant, I don't mean that in a nefarious way, but she was new to America, came from Puerto Rico. She didn't know a lot of things, and she tried to overly protect me. So I didn't have that figure to show me how to do the most basic things and give me the street smarts and stuff like that. So it was hard. I saw other kids with dads and wondered why I didn't have one, blah, 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 the
Did
whole.
you celebrate Father's Day? Did you guys do anything to?
No, maybe it's mental block, but I cannot recall Father's Day
I'm
like in
always,
my youth.
I will say I'm always curious. I don't know that curious is the right word, but there's a lot of families out there that don't have a father, whether because it's a domestic separation or, we know a lot of veterans or a lot of families that lost um, loved ones, fathers.
That's different, and I would say I'm sure they'd still honor them in some way, shape, or form in those cases. And it's funny, as I got older, I would actually call my sisters and tell them Happy Father's Day. Because in essence, it was in my case, it was women who made me the man I am today. And I know there's, whether I offend you or not, I really don't give a shit. A boy's a boy, a girl's a girl. They taught me to be a man, and it is what it is. It didn't take a man to make this man. It took women to make this man.
Did you Pete sitting?
I still do.
That makes sense. That explains a
Hey, look, there's some things I'm just taking back. When it's 3 a.m. and you're tired and wobbly, it's
lot. That's
easier
just a
just to
smart,
sit.
yeah. That's just a smart way to go about it.
You know what I mean? I got yelled at one too many times for peeing on the floor, and this alleviates that problem very, very easily. But so yeah, I would say it affected me not having a dad. It still affects me to this day. You go through these progressions, and again, we're not going to be here all day talking about it, but even now, like when I had kids, especially boys, for some reason, really, really bothered me because I would look at these boys, obviously vicariously seeing myself as a young child, wondering, and I love my kids just as you love your kids, so like we do anything for our kids. But I look at this child and be like, there's nothing I would do for you. Why didn't my dad have that same feeling about me? And you can't do that. And I know it's something you work through and whatnot, but it ran through my mind. It wasn't easy. Now, granted, later on in life, when I joined the military, I started having a relationship with my father. There was outside variables, that affected his mental health, which was mainly alcohol. As we sit here sipping on beer and whiskey. But he came around in the senses when I joined the military. I actually had a good rapport going, and he was supposed to come to my Marine Corps boot camp graduation. Ended up having a stroke while I was in boot camp, and suffered severe brain damage. So he's essentially like a 5-year-old kid trapped in a man's body. So that never happened. So that had a little, that anger and guilt with that too. Again, over it, did the whole kumbaya thing. Wish I could do, have a redo, but we don't. So now I basically am the father that I never had to my kids, which takes some fine tuning too, because I don't want to spoil them. I have to be able to show them responsibility, but I also want to give them everything I never had. So I have to find that healthy balance because, it's hard finding unicorns to give to my kids.
Well, you bring a good point about you say about not having redos, and I don't necessarily think that's true. Your redo may not be with your dad, but your redo
Right.
is the way you pass it forward, right? While you learn
Correct.
from it. Um, my father was probably as perfect of a father as anybody could ask for. I mean, he was there for me all the time. Was always the one chaperoning uh, school trips. I remember when I moved out of my parents' house into my first apartment, he would wait outside on the stairs while I come home, and he would have like groceries for me, and you know, so he was as as perfect as I could have hoped to have a father growing up, and he passed 14 years ago, and it's actually his birthday next week, or would have been his birthday, but my my challenge is how do I live up to that expectation, that bar that was set
So
for
high.
me, right? And
Well, you not to interrupt you, because kind of like what you said to me, where you can't redo. But at the same time, you're saying he set a bar. I don't think he set a bar. He gave you guidelines to follow. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like right here,
Well, I'll be honest.
kind of like Miyamoto Musashi and the precepts, right? Can't follow them to the T, but it's a guide. So he essentially wrote his own Dakota, however you say Dakota in Hebrew.
Well, the thing is, no, you're right. And by the way, it would have been in Spanish with my dad, but
That's true. I forgot.
but
I didn't know who was Spanish, your dad or your mom?
both. They're
Oh,
both
that's right. They're
Argentinians.
both Argentinians.
Yep.
Man, that's like pure evil right there.
Pure. Except for my dad. I hope my mom doesn't listen. Anyways, though, what I'm saying is, you know, you can call it a code to follow, a bar, whatever it is. The reality is that for me, and Tyler will attest to that. Oftentimes, I kind of judge myself or blame myself because I try to compare myself to that code and I can't meet it. And
I've experienced that with you as well. More times than one. More times than one. And I think that's normal. You know what I mean? Even as grown men, we're at that age where we can't trust our farts. We pee 10 times a day. But we still, like you're trying to live it up to an expectation that your father, or, an example that your father set. And I'm trying to fill a void that I never had. It's never going to stop. It's always going to continue. It'll continue. Like, even when you said, like, when you move into your apartment and your dad was waiting for you there, it's going to keep going and going and going. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter when I joined the Marines, when I was in the Army, and over 20 plus years as a cop, my mom still insists on buying me underwear and socks every year. And I have to stop her.
Why?
Because it's just not right. It's just not right.
You can never have too many socks and underwear.
I know, but that's like, my wife does that for me now.
You don't buy your own underwear and socks? There's a whole different issue here that we have to do.
No, I try to, but like my wife, like, like us guys, you get a little hole in your underwear, right? Now we're going off topic a little bit here, but it's kind of synonymous, right?
It has to do with Father's Day. Obviously, it's a loop.
Yeah. So, we don't care. It's like a vent, right? It's worn. It's finally comfortable. You got through that manufacturer feel stiff and whatnot. You broke them in, a lot of rubbing going on and whatnot in the grundle and the, the ball.
One day they're gone because your wife threw them away because she fought there.
Right. So she tears them and throws them away. And then she'll like buy new ones thinking that I wouldn't notice. And I'm like, where the hell are, my XYZ underwear? Oh, I had a hole in them. They were broken. I'm like, no, they were broken in. They're not broken, So, yeah. So same thing with socks.
Gotcha.
Then I don't know how we got on that tangent, but.
Well, I talk about your mom buying you socks and underwear. But let me ask you this. What is one thing that you try to do to be a better dad?
Man, you mean one out of the many things?
Yeah,
I'll tell you what I've recently started doing, and I have seen the benefits of it, right? We're human beings as parents, as dads. We're going to have emotional days. Like, yes, I came home, I was very tired. I was exhausted. My body hurt, my back, my knee. Sometimes I have worse days than others. And I get home and I'm exhausted. I go downstairs to my man cave, go to change. I just want to take a giant deuce because, it's the first thing I do when I get home. I got to lay waste and, relax. I go in and there's submarines in the toilet. And I'm like, as all parents go, sometimes kids forget to flush the toilet. I automatically accused my kids. And I said, one of you have 3 seconds to come in here and flush this toilet. And they're playing Xbox nicely and quietly. They're allotted technology time. And they both freak out. I didn't do it. I didn't know they had friends over that day. And apparently it was one of them. But I automatically accused them because they'd done it before, like the boy who cried wolf. And in 3 seconds, they didn't flush the poop. So I went over there, turned off the Xbox. They flipped out. We didn't do it. We're turning it back on. So I ripped the wires out. I kept escalating. They're screaming, crying. I sent them to their rooms. My wife tells me, I think it was one of the kids. It was a misunderstanding. So what do? I got on my knees, called them into the living room, and I apologized to each one of them, for misunderstanding, not letting them explain themselves, for overreacting myself. And I asked for their forgiveness. And it's hard because as you're the parent. You're supposed to be in charge, right? You're you know, like, especially as military guys, you know, right? You give an order, you're not supposed to be wrong. Do as I say, rah. But I've had to humble myself a lot more now, and ask for their forgiveness, and make sure I show my love for them. And because one thing I don't ever want my kids to do is fear me, right? Ever, ever, ever. The day they fear me, I think, and I know it, I think it would destroy me. So I think that's one of the biggest things recently now is kind of doing that, apologizing when I need to, getting on their level and acknowledging them as little people. They're actual people, with thoughts and desires and questions and whatnot, and not just saying you're just a kid. You don't know. I know. I've lived. They are living. They have a life to a certain point. So I'm letting them kind of live and express themselves for that up to that point from what they know. Man, that was a lot.
That was a lot, very deep, and I think that's awesome. So I'll tell you two things that I'm doing that that I hope are making a difference. One of them is I realize specifically for me, I share custody with all of my kids, but the newest baby, right?
Right.
So I see them very limited amount of time, and a lot of that is pick you up from school, do homework, let's do dinner, get ready to go to sleep. So it's not really quality time.
Right. It's
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 it's not
necessary stuff.
right. And top that off, this past week we were gone for a week, which means I missed my days with them, and we travel a lot, so oftentimes that happens. So one thing that I try doing is every week I have time blocked out for one child. I do whatever they want.
Quality time.
Yeah, we go to the park. We with my daughter we went and had coffee, whatever it is, right? But it's not long. It's an hour and a half because the other kids are still getting ready for dinner or whatnot. But it's my time dedicated to them. I don't check my phone. I take a picture usually to kind of
Right.
that's the only thing I do with the phone. But I hope that makes a difference. And it seems like they're looking forward to it because they argue, is it my turn this week? Is it my turn this week? Because we rotate.
Right.
So that's one thing I'm doing. The other thing is start to address them. You said little people. I have a 15-year-old daughter. She's not a little person anymore.
No, she's not.
She's a mature girl, and starting to address them in that manner. Like recently, I had I had an issue with her mom, right? And not an issue, but there was a disagreement on a topic. And instead of hiding it from my daughter or playing games, I sat her down and I like listen, I want to talk to you. This is what's going on. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. This is how, your mother is addressing it, and have a mature conversation with her. And she felt uncomfortable initially. She said that. But at the end, I think also she realized that I'm not playing games with her. I am being sincere and honest. And I think that also goes a long way, especially as they get older.
Right. And in that case, and again, I'm not in that situation, so I can't speak empirically, but I've known you long enough. I watched Isabella grow up into this woman, and every time I see her, I get tears in my eyes, like, oh my God, we're gonna have to start buying lime and burying bodies here soon.
Yeah. Did I tell you you said about you don't want your kids fearing you? I don't want my kids fearing me, but I'm super happy when she comes to me and she said, listen, my friends are afraid of you. Like,
Yeah,
good.
absolutely.
That's awesome.
I
I'm good
say,
with that.
and wait till they meet all her crazy uncles,
Right?
because she's got a lot of them.
We're just going to show every time they come in, we're going to show them the haka from the wedding.
But and it is important because I can't imagine when you have children in those situations, it almost like they become in their minds like a piece of property that's being passed back and forth, like almost they start thinking it's burdensome, but you're making her a part of it, and she understands that now, that you're my dad and you love me and I have a mom that loves me too, and now you're making her aware, because she's going to be making her own decisions and making her own thoughts on things and stuff like that. So it's important that I think that you're transparent with her.
I think also what happened is oftentimes I end up giving up because I don't want the disagreement or the confrontation, especially I don't want to fight being over my daughter, right? She's not a commodity.
Correct.
So, this was the first time that I sat her down and say, I don't want you to feel like I am giving up on time with you for this or for that. I am sincerely thinking about what is best for you. And there are fights that are more important for me to fight and fights that
Correct.
and I think that was well received, I would hope. I guess
Well, it's funny you said that, because it just made that quote that I always use a lot about a warrior and a fighter, right? And differentiating the two, because one's driven by purpose, one by reason. One lives to fight and one fights to live, which is us, the warriors, and you're fighting for that specific life. You know when to attack, you know when to digress, which is the essence of a true warrior poet, which is, initiatives that we've been working on and you're working on with the league and stuff like that. Um, so that's cool. That's stuff that I look up to too, because you have older kids, you're like my big brother, to me, mentor and friend. So, I mean, I appreciate that too. You talk about how am I feeling that, those goals that my father said. Yeah, because I know it's not just me, but there's other people, your other fathers and other people in this brotherhood that is Masada, the league, Silver Savage, everything else, that we all feed off each other, you know, and hopefully there's fathers who listen to this and maybe pick up some cues as well, So I think that's pretty cool.
Well, I appreciate it. So, what is one mistake that you made that you learned from or decided not to do again?
Uh, so this was more like personal and psychological. Um, I thought, because I wanted to give my kids everything I didn't have, and when I say that, that's a lot, be it physically and or emotionally. I grew up in a household where it was not uncommon to eat cornmeal a whole week, which was government issued because we couldn't afford food. So for a while, I tend to spoil my kids because I thought that's how you show affection. And I learned real quick that's not the way you do it. And it's like you're spending quality time and creating those core memories with your kids. So one of the things that is important for me, kind of like you said, when you turn off your phone, if I'm playing with my kids, I don't answer mine. I'm not interrupting quality time with my kids. Or if I'm doing something for myself, like woodworking or working on a farm or something like that, and one of my kids asks me, hey dad, can you help me with something? I don't say anymore, I'll be right there, or wait till I'm done. I drop everything I'm doing to help them, unless it's something that I can't drop, and I go
Well, I
help.
would argue though there is value in them learning also that patience and that
Correct. And
sometimes.
that's what I mean. Like if it's something that it's, like I'm working on something significant in the house, electrical work or something like that for the livelihood of the home. But if it's something that's like that could wait, like I said, if I'm working on a project or I'm cleaning a gun, yes, then if not, then yes, I teach them the art of patience, which it is an art.
I try to include them in those things. So, for example, if I do any kind of work around the house and my kids come and say, "Can you
Mhm.
do this with me? Can you do that?" And I'll be like, "You know what? If you help me finish this project
you,
faster,
you get done faster. Yeah.
so it's a win-win in that sense."
Yeah.
One event that I remember, and again, there's obviously been a million mistakes that I've made, but the one that always stuck with me is with Ari. He was now 6. He was a lot younger at the time, but he's my little bruiser. He's my
Yeah.
tank, and he went and strike his brother, I think, was older than him and whatever. And I went over to him and I grabbed his hand and I smacked him on the hand as I'm saying, "We do not hit."
Right.
And
So you
when I
basically did what you told them not to do.
and as I was doing it, and I'm realizing the stupidity of my action at that moment and the double standards, I never hit him again. I don't think I ever hit him before that. I think that's the only time I ever did it. And I've never laid hands on them. I'm like, that is not productive and conducive to anything. And it certainly doesn't teach the right lesson in my mind.
I agree. And I grew up in a household, typical Latino household. I got my butt beat.
Oh, I got slapped with a belt.
I've got hit with frying pans. If I hit under the bed, I got poked with broom handles.
Oh, nice.
But my mom was very innovative. But you're right. It didn't accomplish anything. I kept doing what it was I was told not to do. Um,
He taught you to try and hide it better so they don't find out.
right. Yeah, pretty much.
Which really is not what I want my kids to do. I want my
No.
kids to, if you mess up, have the balls come and be honest. Your punishment is going to be a lot less severe if you're honest with me than if I
Right.
find out that you lied to me.
Yeah, and that's what I try to instill in my kids too. Like, no matter what, there's nothing you can do where that's gonna make me stop loving you. My love for you is unconditional. I may be disappointed sometimes, I may be a little upset, but I will never stop loving you. So I would expect you to come and tell me the truth. Um, and it took some time. Now my kids are starting to admit when they do something, and all I have to do is do the whole "don't lie to me" because you know the consequence is going to be worse. Okay, I said this and blah blah blah. So it's nice when you get to that point, you know, and it's a work in progress. It was a work in progress for me because it wasn't always like that, and I know there's still sometimes where it's not like that. Eventually, I get the truth out, but yeah, the hitting, I remember threatening it in the beginning, where you know I told my son, you know, I'm gonna have to spank you, you know, for doing what you did, and or I told him, I said you could choose. You're gonna get 2 spanks, or I'm gonna take away your electronics. And he looked me right in the face. He goes, just go ahead and spank me. And I'm like, well, that failed, you know? So, and it kind of solidified the fact that, okay, that accomplishes nothing, you know? And what's it going to do? I want my kids to know that there's such a thing as appropriate touching as well as, you know, inappropriate touching. You know, unfortunately, obviously, you know, there's sick people in the world, things happen, but we focus a lot on inappropriate touching. You know, nobody should ever touch you this way, nobody should ever touch you that way. So I try to mimic, especially with my daughter, what appropriate touching is, so that she knows. Because you know, one of the biggest fears I ever got was hearing a sermon in church and talking about how our daughters are gonna, basically, we as fathers are setting the example of the men they're going to marry, and all I could think of was, oh crap, you know. So I try to be the man that I would want her to marry now. You know, my wife and I, you know, we're not perfect, but we try to mimic the couple now that we want our kids to be. You know, we don't want them to see that it's all about conflict all the time or anything like that. And it's a work in progress. There's absolutely nothing perfect about it. You know, there's variables in life. There's trials, tribulations, etc. Um,
And you
but
know
that's
what? Conflict is not a bad thing for them to see.
no.
Also, as long
Yep.
as they see that there's love there as well.
And,
Um,
yeah, and there's resolutions to that conflict. You
right.
know that it's not never ending.
Yep.
You know.
Yep. Because it's just part of life. It's part of any relationship. But as long as they see love, like one thing that Tyler and I made a point is like we're not gonna hide the way we feel towards each other, right? So
No, you
I'll
shouldn't
hug
have
her
to.
and I kiss her, and you know,
Right.
obviously there's some things you don't do in public, but I'm saying is my kids know that I love, you know, my
Right.
wife.
And,
So
and
it's
it's
funny
funny
too.
you say that because with my littlest one, you know, he's not even 3 yet, and it's weird his reaction when I kiss my wife. He actually looks at me and says thank you, and I'm like, okay. Like, it's just weird. Like, he smiles real big and he says thank you for me kissing his mom. So you know, there's something in his subpsyche that says, okay, that's nice, you know, that's special. And so that really resonated with me.
You know, you
But
talk.
you're go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I want to say something about you were talking about punishing your kids earlier and so forth, and that's just another thing that I actually learned from Tyler. She's very good about prompting me to do this. When I punish my kids, send them to the room, whatever it is, she's like, okay, now go and remind them that you love them,
Yep.
and go follow them, sit with them,
Yep.
explain to them what they did wrong, and reaffirm the fact that they're still loved and they're still your kids.
Yep.
Uh, and actions of consequences, and that's about it.
Yep. Go figure, Father's Day, whiskey and rifles. But
Perfect.
yeah, it's the same thing. You know,
That's not a rifle, by the way. Just if the ATF is listening, that is a pistol.
no, this is a SBR. I got the tax stamp.
Okay. Whew. Just gotta make sure it's covered.
I keep it in the handle. This is SBR. I'm a law abiding, responsible gun owning
There you go.
citizen, who's having his rights infringed on in the future, apparently. But that's another story.
Sorry.
But lost my train of thought now.
Talking about telling your kids you love them is really
Oh
fun.
yeah, so and that's one thing. Actually, again, prompted by the wives and the women. If I'm really upset, I don't give a consequence. You know, I'll walk away and say, we're going to talk about this later. Keep doing what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. We'll address this later. I've made the mistake of giving consequences and reacting when I'm upset from what happened or something like that. And it's horrible.
Right. No, I think there should be consequences to action. The response from us as parents cannot be emotional, though. It has to be driven by logic.
Correct. And that's why, knowing me, because, I've dealt and still deal with, vacillating emotional issues and stuff like that. I've now learned when to walk away. And I bite my lip. Like, we're going to talk about this in a little bit. Daddy just needs a couple minutes. I love you. I'll be right back. And I'll go, calm down and then come back and readdress. Because in the past, I use that analogy, and I've done it with my kids listening to a sermon. I'm like, every time you're angry, we get a nice piece of wood, and I had them paint a cool picture on it, right? And it's just a fun picture, like crayons, markers, and stuff. And I put it up, and I called it the angry board. And I told them, every time you get angry at your brother or something like that, I'm going to make you put a nail in the board. And I did it, after about 10 nails, pulled the nails out. I said, how does this picture look now? And I'm like, it's all messed up, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, exactly. That's what anger does, just so they had a visual understanding of what anger does. I'm like, you can't fill those holes back up. You know what I mean? If you do, you're still going to see the results of what anger did. There's no reversing it. Anger begets anger. This is why we need to check it and control it. And giving them that basic visual actually helped me too. But made them understand it, and this is why I try to tell them, if you're going to be angry and upset, that's normal. I said, but you need to go into your room. You can't bring it out into the common area. When you calm down, we'll come back and address it. But I tell you, you can stick your face in your pillow, scream to the end of the earth, spin around upside down, whatever you got to do, get it out of your system. But don't bring the anger out, because it's just going to resonate all around, and, it's contagious,
Right.
So that was another life lesson as well. And I was one of the main culprits of it. So
Interesting. I like that board idea. I may have to steal that one.
yeah, you just call it the angry board. And every time, one of the boys hits another boy, get mad, you make it nice, make them work on it, because you want their hard work to go into it. Have them put a nail in it. And until it gets filled up with nails, you pull them suckers out, and it looks horrible,
Interesting. Cool.
Hey, see, you learn something new every day.
Yep. I learn from you every day, regardless. So, just because you were just messing around with your farms and so forth, and it's Father's Day, I actually just got off another call and talking about possibly taking my kids shooting tomorrow for Father's Day. We'll see how that goes.
Oh,
But
sweet.
what do you think is an appropriate age to
Um,
shoot?
so that's very subjective,
I
obviously,
agree.
especially now with the heated debates of gun control and whatnot, and I try to have what's the word here? Mature and responsible debate with people who I would say don't understand the 2A community. I think that's one of the biggest problems right now is misinformation, disinformation, and just complete,
Ignorance.
ignorance. And again, I don't say that in a mean way, but of the 2A, and like for example, obviously the AR-15 is very much attacked. I guarantee you there can be a lot of dads getting AR-15s for Father's Day. I love mine. And yeah, it is a weapon of war because in theory it's used in a war, but
So
there's
it's a bolt action rifle, and so it's a knife, and
exactly,
so is a pistol.
and I had a person tell me, they should ban all AR-15s. And just kind of playing along, I said, you know what, that's fine. I'll just buy an AR-10. And when I said that, they were like, wait a minute, what's an AR-10? I'm like, it's not an AR-15. What do you care? And they're like, okay, yeah, and they just went on. I said, would you like to know what an AR-10 is? They're like, sure. I said, well, it's the bigger, beefier version of the AR-15. It carries a bullet that's about 3 times bigger than that and holds just as many rounds. Why are you not worried about that? Oh, well, is that an assault weapon? And I just kind of put my head in my hands, like, an assault weapon is any weapon used in an assault. There's no actual weapon designated as an assault weapon. And then I use the analogy of, what are the leading causes of death in society when you look at FBI statistics is usually vehicular homicide, be it intentional or involuntary, right? Yet we don't ban automobiles. We hold the driver responsible, right? They go through programs, they get arrested, etc. What's the difference? And I never can get a good answer from that. Like if you actually look at the statistics of firearms crimes, and me, I'm a nerd. I like looking this stuff up. I do a lot of research and whatnot, talk about history, etc. The the rifle, all right, the AR platforms and stuff like that, I think are under 1% used in crimes, and with semi-automatic pistols being the primary weapon used in crimes and homicides, however they're used. And the majority of that, like over 90%, is in everyday street crime. The mass shootings, which are horrible. Again, I always say, look, if I had the power to make firearms never exist in the world, I would. It'd be a world of peace. That'd be wonderful. But the reality is, it's not. And they're here. Hey, you can thank the Chinese for that. They invented the arquebus. They started it. And we're blaming them for everything else anyway. But the reality is they're here, and we have. If you're going to pass legislation, which I'm not opposed to, but it's got to be like smart. It's got to be reasonable. It's got to be tangible. It's got to make sense. And nothing thus far has made sense. And it's amazing to me how, again, we say the word ignorant. When I've had these debates where you hear people say, well, we need to have background checks when you pass fire. I'm like, we do. Like
those already exist.
Right. And when I hear that the red flag, let's just say a relative said, well, we should have red flag laws. I'm like, most states already do. They're like, what? I'm like, they're not called that, but they exist. In Maryland, we have XYZ. I know. I've written them. I've enforced them as a law enforcement officer, unfortunately. And they're not safe to enforce because you have a lot of people who feel their rights are being infringed on. And there's misconceptions with that too, because they think the laws completely take your firearms away, which isn't the case. It's just essentially a temporary holding onto, mental health can be determined, And so it's essentially the red flag law, which I think that's the biggest issue here. Is we have no way to track mental health. You can't, it's not like that Tom Cruise movie, Minority Report, right? We can't predict crime. If we could, I mean, that's a whole another civil rights issue right there in itself. So again, it's just, I hate getting into this topic because
I know. Let me bring it back and ask you, when would you take your kids shooting?
Oh yeah, that was the original question. Shit. Okay, so like I said before, it's subjective. So what I've done, I don't push my kids at all. They all get the gun safety class. They've read the books, the gun safety books. I actually make them read the gun safety books, and then I quiz them on it to ensure that they know with a training firearm, how to safely point it, finger off the trigger, storage, etc. What do you do if you find a firearm? I think it's detrimental to children to say firearms are evil, and keeping them away from them, because if they ever do encounter them, which is a possibility, they're not going to know what to do. And I think that's when kids get hurt. And unfortunately, I have friends and know people where children, unfortunately shot themselves because they didn't understand the severity of the firearm, of what it can do, and how to safely manipulate it. So what I do, my kids go through a progression. I don't pick the age. I let them choose when they're ready. And I start them off with Nerf guns, have safety, point in the right direction, never point it at anything you don't intend to shoot, kind of thing. And then they graduate to BB guns. I have a whole BB range set up, and my kids practice proper sight alignment, proper trigger control, and they have so much fun. And typically after about 10 minutes, they're like, okay, yeah, this isn't fun anymore. I can leave all my firearms out now, and my kids will walk by them and just go, Dad, you left your guns out, put them away, we're going to trip over them. It's like they could care less. They had that initial curiosity, but once I went through the whole spew of it, they're like, this is a waste of time. I want nothing to do with it. But they know how to safely manipulate them. So now my daughter, my oldest, Eva, she came up to me, and she saw me shooting with the BB guns, and she said, Daddy, when can I shoot a real one? I said, well, let me show you the different sizes of bullets, their capabilities, how loud they are, showed her videos. And she said, I think I'm ready to shoot the little one, which was the 22. I said, awesome, perfect. Went through dry firing with her with all the 22s, pistol, my 22 AR, and the Ruger. Once she showed me proficiency on how to manipulate all the firearms, I said, you graduated. So now she's ready. How old is my daughter? 12. So at 12, she'll be 13 here soon. She felt she was ready to manipulate that firearm, but I never pushed it on them. So
Right.
I've seen 5-year-olds shooting firearms, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. But I don't think I shoot consistently enough, and I'm not so hardcore in the culture that my kids are like, I want to do what daddy's doing. I think if I did, they would be a lot more. But yeah, I don't think there's a specific age. For me, it's more of I give them the tools, I give them the knowledge, and they let me know when they're ready.
Right. So I agree with you on that. I do think slightly different. They also have to read the books. They have to learn. They get quizzed about the safety rules and so forth. But they each own actually. Well, they don't own. I own it, but
They're dedicated to that.
yeah, it's allocated to them in theory. They each have a pistol and a rifle, 22s. The minimum age in which they can shoot them is 5 years old. They cannot do anything before that, but they can have access to them. And what I mean by that, they obviously like in a safe. But if they want to see their firearms, I go and I show it to them, and it's an opportunity for me to practice the safety rules with them even more and so forth. So my goal with all of that is to take the mystique away. I agree with you. I think a lot of accidents happen for lack of knowledge and because kids feel, well, I know daddy has a gun, so I'm going to try and go behind his back when he's not here. My
Right.
kids will never have that because they can always see it, handle it, and so forth. All they have to do is ask, and they know that. Um,
Right.
and Isabella, so 15-year-old now, she had a rifle
Oh
since
my
she was
God.
nine.
It
And
just made me throw up in my mouth. Go ahead.
but she never showed an interest in shooting until I took Boaz a few years back. So he probably was 6 or 7 at the time, and he wanted to go shooting finally. So she goes, you know what? I'm just gonna tag along because I have nothing better to do. And she ended up having more fun than he
Right.
did. So now she wants to keep shooting, and Boaz is like, yeah, this was fun. This was cool. I don't
Right.
think
I
we need to
don't
do
want
it
to
now.
do it again.
Yeah, I can wait. So, so again, much like you, I feel it's a maturity thing. One of my kids did an unsafe act with a bow and arrow, just goofing around instead of aiming it towards a target, aiming a direction it wasn't supposed to. So consequences, like we discussed earlier, obviously bow and arrow taken away for a period of time, but now,
Horrible dad.
but
Horrible dad.
that translates now to farms as well. I'm like, you got
Yeah.
to show me that you are mature and can handle it and not goof around before you can handle a farm again.
Right.
So, but maturity
Well,
is so
that goes right back to the whole dad thing too, like, being a responsible dad. And we're both 2A guys, and I know we both believe that if you're going to take on the responsibility of owning a firearm, you need to educate yourself in it for one. And if you have children, I think that responsibility obviously is even more. I would love to sleep with guns under my pillow and, a rifle over my fireplace and all that stuff. But the truth is, that's even knowing that my kids can handle weapons safely, I would never do that. Not now.
funnily enough, that used to be the norm in this country not that long ago either.
Right.
Things
Well,
have changed so drastically.
yeah, and I brought that same topic up where you look at the 1940s up until a certain point, right? Firearm safety was actually taught in school curriculums.
Right.
Schools had shooting teams. It was not uncommon to have a firearm in a classroom, and you're going through the nomenclature. It's typically it was standard 22 rifles. That kind of style of repeating rifle where you were we were taught this. Kids learn the respect of it.
We didn't have
Uh,
active shooters. I'm curious how that.
well, I have my own personal opinion on that. Obviously, when we started messing with the psychology of children, I think that's when we started seeing a shift in the culture. Obviously, this happened from Columbine on, in the 90s, mid 90s on up, we started seeing that transition. And I think that's where we start seeing that degradation of a certain structure, of how we did things with children. And, and we can say this till we're blue in the face. The fact of the matter is, I hate saying this is how it used to be, but problem is this is now, we have a problem, we need to address it, and we need to address it in a smart way. We all come from, especially us, we come from a different realm. You know, I mean, like when I got bullied, I had to deal with it. You know, I didn't have a choice. You know, eventually I flipped out and hit someone with a trumpet. You know what I mean?
Still my favorite story.
Which made it in a book, which is awesome. You know, and yeah, did it affect me psychologically? It did. But it was just a different time. You know, it was like, you know, you had to toughen up and do things. You know, you had to be more resilient. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have all that. You couldn't reach out, touch someone, bully someone over the phones. Unfortunately, those are the problems and the challenges we face now. You know, like, you know, I gotta look at my kids' chats on the Xbox to make sure there's nothing crazy going on. It's like I would never have been able to fathom that, you know, growing up. You know, for me, it was, I watched China Beach Tour of Duty in the A-Team, you know, and I played freeze tag outside and manhunt. You know, and when the street lights came on, it was time to go inside. You know what I mean? So it's just different. I mean, I know it was different in Israel. You know, manhunt was like for real manhunt, and you know, you had to avoid like incoming missiles and stuff like that. Same thing with me. You know, in my neighborhood, it was more gunfire than missiles, but you know, kind of synonymous in some way, shape, or form.
So Father's Day tomorrow. I think we impaired some of our knowledge, and everybody's a better dad for that now.
I don't know about that, but I will say, I one of the greatest accomplishments I've ever accomplished in the history of my life is becoming a dad.
100%.
You know, making humans, or assisting in making humans, and being able to raise them. As I like to say, my goal is to make them a part of the solution and not a part of the problem.
Yeah, I'm just trying not to fuck it up.
Exactly. I was trying to say it in a nicer way.
Well, I wish all the fathers out there, obviously this will drop on Monday, so it's going to be a day after Father's Day when people can actually listen to this, but I hope everybody had a great Father's Day, and you know, hopefully the change in our culture, the change in our society actually starts with us as parents.
It does.
And I think hopefully this podcast did a little something to drive someone maybe to be a better dad and spend more time with their kids. And who knows what
we're dust in the wind, man. As soon as, you know, we're blink of an eye, our kids are going to be adults putting us in the grave, hopefully. You know, I always say hopefully because I want my children to bury me, not the other way around, heaven forbid, because unfortunately there are obviously parents that have, but you know, it's a short time we get, so we got to do what we can to help make them part of the solution.
Yep. All right, brother. Thank you for your time. Go play with your guns.
Yeah. See you on Monday.
Later, buddy.
Have a good night, brother. Love you. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this latest episode of the Silver Savage podcast. Please go ahead and give our podcast a like, share the link with a friend, and help us spread the word. You can follow us on social media as well. Instagram handle is silver_savage45. You can also find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and our YouTube channel where you can watch all these episodes videos as well. More unique content, merchandising, and events are coming soon too, so make sure to follow.